Nora Blackwood had perfected the art of living without being touched. At 26, she moved through her small downtown apartment like a ghost, careful not to brush against door frames or let her skin meet anything that might have been handled by another person. Her world had shrunk to these four walls, where every surface was sanitized and every interaction happened through screens. The morning routine never varied. Wake at 8, feed Machi her orange tabby cat, then settle at the computer that served as her window to the outside world. As a freelance translator, Nora could work entirely from home, converting German technical manuals and French poetry into English without ever having to explain why she wore gloves to pick up packages or why delivery drivers found her standing 6 feet back from her own doorway. Machi was her salvation. The cat's warm fur against her palms reminded Nora that she wasn't completely cut off from physical comfort. Animals didn't trigger her condition, something about their different body chemistry the doctors had theorized, while human skin felt like touching molten metal. Machi's soft coat brought only peace. "What do you think, girl?" Nora asked, scratching behind Machi's ears as she read an email from her sister in Portland. "Rebecca wants to visit again. Says she misses me." The cat purred, oblivious to the complexity of human relationships, fractured by invisible barriers. Nora's condition had no proper name. The medical term, severe contact urticaria with psychosomatic amplification, felt clinical and cold. What it meant in practice was that any skin-to-skin contact with another person sent fire racing through her nerves, followed by angry welts that could last for days. A handshake became torture. A hug was unthinkable. She'd been 8 when it started, just after her parents' messy divorce. The first incident happened when her teacher tried to comfort her during a crying spell, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. The burning sensation had been so intense that Nora had screamed, convinced she was on fire. Doctors ran endless tests, trying everything from allergy medications to therapy, but nothing worked. If anything, the condition had gotten worse over the years. The isolation had become complete during college. While her roommates hugged friends goodbye and linked arms walking across campus, Nora learned to navigate social situations like a chess game, always staying several moves ahead to avoid accidental contact. She'd graduated summa cum laude, but hadn't attended the ceremony. The thought of accidentally brushing against someone in the crowd had been too terrifying. Now, 3 years later, her life had settled into a predictable rhythm of solitude. Groceries delivered to her door. Clothes ordered online in soft fabrics that wouldn't irritate her hypersensitive skin. Video calls with family that let her see their faces without risking their touch. It was safe, controlled, and utterly lonely. The phone rang at 2:30, interrupting her work on a dense technical manual about hydraulic engineering. Dr. Patricia Henley's name appeared on the screen, her dermatologist, and the only medical professional who truly understood her condition. "Nora, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Dr. Henley's familiar voice was warm, but carried an undertone of excitement. "I wanted to talk to you about something new. There's a physical therapist here in the city who's been having remarkable success with patients who have touch-related disorders. His name is Dr. Marcus Rivera." Nora's stomach clenched. She'd tried physical therapy before, years ago. The attempt to gradually desensitize her to touch had only made everything worse, leaving her with panic attacks that lasted for weeks. "I know what you're thinking," Dr. Henley continued, "but Marcus has a different approach. He specializes in neurological pain disorders, and he's developed some innovative techniques. I really think he might be able to help you." That evening, Nora sat by her window, overlooking the busy street below. People walked by in pairs and groups, their casual touches, a hand on a shoulder, fingers briefly interlaced, seeming as natural as breathing. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, watching a couple embrace under a streetlight. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to be held without pain. Dr. Marcus Rivera arrived at his clinic every morning at 7 sharp, an hour before his first appointment. The quiet time allowed him to center himself, to push away the memories that still haunted his sleep 6 months after leaving his practice. In Denver, his new office in the heart of the city was smaller than his previous one, but it felt safer somehow, a place where he could start over without the weight of past failures pressing down on him. Marcus had always been drawn to the patients. Others couldn't help. The chronic pain sufferers, the ones with mysterious conditions that defied easy treatment. His specialty in neurological disorders had made him something of a legend in Denver, the therapist who could work miracles with patients everyone else had given up on, until the day his confidence had cost someone everything. Jennifer Martinez had been 19, a dancer whose career had been derailed by a rare nerve condition that caused excruciating pain in her legs. Marcus had been so certain he could help her, had pushed treatment protocols further than he should have. The experimental therapy had backfired catastrophically, leaving Jennifer with permanent nerve damage that ended not just her dancing career, but her ability to walk without assistance. Dr. Rivera, his receptionist, Mrs. Chun, knocked softly on his office door. "Your 8 o'clock is here, Mrs. Patterson, for her follow-up." Marcus straightened his shoulders and forced a smile. Mrs. Patterson was recovering from a stroke and making excellent progress. These were the victories he focused on now, small, steady improvements rather than ambitious breakthroughs that could destroy lives. The morning passed in a blur of familiar routines. Gentle exercises for recovering stroke patients, balance training for elderly clients, range of motion work for accident victims. Marcus threw himself into each session with careful attention, but always held something back. He'd learned to be more cautious, more conservative in his approach. During his lunch break, Dr. Henley called from the dermatology clinic across town. They'd worked together before. She often referred patients with skin conditions that affected their mobility or caused chronic pain. "Marcus, I have a patient I'd like you to consider," she said without preamble. "Her name is Nora Blackwood. She has severe contact urticaria. Any human touch causes her intense pain and physical reactions. She's been essentially housebound for years." Marcus felt his chest tighten. This was exactly the kind of complex case he'd once eagerly accepted, the type of challenge that had ultimately led to his downfall. "Patricia, I'm not sure I'm the right fit for something that specialized. Maybe she'd be better with someone who has more experience in dermatological conditions. You're the only therapist I know who's had success with neurologically based pain disorders," Dr. Henley pressed. "And Marcus, this young woman is dying of loneliness. She hasn't had human contact in years. If anyone can help her, it's you." That afternoon, Marcus found himself researching contact urticaria, diving deep into medical journals and case studies. The condition was rare and poorly understood, often dismissed as psychosomatic by doctors who couldn't find clear physical causes. But the pain was real. Patients described it as feeling like their skin was on fire, with reactions that could last for days. Most interesting were the few documented cases where patients had shown improvement through gradual exposure therapy, though the success rate was discouragingly low. The key seemed to be building trust slowly, using barrier methods initially, and never pushing beyond what the patient could tolerate. As he read, Marcus found his old excitement returning. The thrill of a medical puzzle, the possibility of helping someone reclaim their life. But immediately behind that excitement came the familiar stab of fear. What if he failed again? What if his confidence hurt another patient? His phone buzzed with a text from his sister in California. "How are you settling into the new practice? Mom's worried you're isolating yourself too much." Marcus stared at the message, recognizing the irony. Here he was, considering taking on a patient whose entire life was defined by isolation, while he himself had been hiding from meaningful connections since Jennifer's case. That evening, Marcus walked through the city park near his apartment, watching joggers and dog walkers enjoy the mild weather. A young couple sat on a bench nearby, the woman's head resting on her partner's shoulder while he absently stroked her hair. Such simple intimacy, taken for granted by people who'd never had to question their right to touch and be touched. Thought about Nora Blackwood, somewhere in the city, probably watching the same scene from behind a window. What would it be like to go years without the basic human comfort of physical contact? To have your own skin become a prison that kept you locked away from connection? Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to Dr. Henley's number. Before he could second-guess himself, he pressed call. "Patricia, it's Marcus. About that patient, Nora Blackwood. I'd like to meet with her. But I want to be completely upfront about my limitations. I can offer careful, conservative treatment, but I won't make promises I can't keep. That's all I'm asking for," Dr. Henley said, and Marcus could hear the smile in her voice. "I'll have her call you tomorrow." As Marcus hung up, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months, a sense of purpose beyond his own guilt and fear. Maybe helping Nora find her way back to human connection could also help him find his way back to the healer he'd once been. Nora's hands shook as she stood outside the Riverside Physical Therapy Clinic. She'd circled the block twice, trying to work up the courage to go inside. Mach's carrier felt heavy in her grip. Dr. Rivera had been understanding when she'd explained that she needed her therapy cat for anxiety support. The building was modern and welcoming, with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. Through the glass, she could see patients working with therapists, moving through exercises that looked gentle and encouraging. It was nothing like the sterile, intimidating medical facilities she'd grown accustomed to. "We can do this," she whispered. To Machi, who meowed softly in response, the receptionist, a kind-looking older woman, smiled warmly as Nora approached the desk. "You must be Nora. Dr. Rivera is ready for you. His office is just down the hall, second door on the right." Nora had expected another clinical examination room, but Dr. Rivera's office felt more like a comfortable living room. 2 armchairs sat facing each other with a small coffee table between them, and soft instrumental music played quietly in the background. Framed degrees hung on the walls alongside photographs of mountains and forests. "Nora?" A voice called from behind her. She turned to see a man in his early 30s, with kind dark eyes and an easy smile. He was tall but not intimidating, dressed casually in khakis and a button-down shirt. Most importantly, he stood a respectful distance away, making no move to shake her hand or approach too closely. "I'm Marcus," he said, gesturing toward the chairs. "Please sit wherever feels comfortable. I see you brought a friend." His eyes crinkled with genuine warmth as he noticed Machi's carrier. Nora settled into the chair farthest from him and released Machi, who immediately began exploring the office with feline curiosity. "She helps with my anxiety. I hope that's okay, of course. I love cats. What's her name?" "Machi. She's been with me for 3 years." Nora watched as Marcus knelt down, extending his hand for Machi to sniff. The cat approached cautiously, then rubbed against his fingers, purring. "She's beautiful," Marcus said, sitting back in his chair. "Dr. Henley told me a little about your condition, but I'd like to hear about it from your perspective. What's it like for you when someone touches your skin?" There was something different about the way he asked the question. Other doctors had focused on symptoms and medical history, but Marcus seemed genuinely interested in her experience as a person, not just a case study. "It's like being burned," Nora said quietly. "The moment skin touches skin, it feels like someone pressed a hot iron against me. Then the welts appear, angry, red, painful, They can last for days, sometimes weeks if the contact was prolonged. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, taking notes but keeping his eyes on her face. How long have you been dealing with this? 18 years. It started when I was 8, right after my parents divorced. At first, doctors thought it was stress-related, but it never went away. If anything, it got worse over time. That must have been incredibly isolating, especially as a child. The simple acknowledgement brought tears to Nora's eyes. Most people tried to offer solutions or minimize her experience, but Marcus just listened with complete attention. I stopped going to school events, birthday parties, anywhere I might accidentally be touched. I learned to keep distance from everyone. She gestured toward Machi, who had settled on the carpet between them. Animals are different. They don't trigger the reaction. Interesting, Marcus said, making another note. Have you ever had your skin touched by someone without experiencing pain? Never. Not once in 18 years. They talked for another 20 minutes about her daily life, her isolation, her fears about trying therapy again. Marcus never pushed or suggested she was exaggerating. When their time was nearly up, something unexpected happened. Marcus had been demonstrating a simple breathing exercise, moving his chair slightly closer to show her the proper hand positioning. As he reached forward to adjust his notebook, his fingers accidentally brushed against her wrist, where her sleeve had ridden up. Both of them froze. Nora waited for the familiar fire to spread across her skin, for the burning sensation that always followed human contact. But instead of pain, she felt only the warm, gentle pressure of another person's touch. Did that hurt? Marcus asked quietly, his voice filled with wonder. Nora stared down at the spot where his skin touched hers. No redness, no swelling, no pain. At all. I know, it doesn't hurt. Marcus looked as shocked as she felt. This is remarkable. I've never seen anything like this. Try it again, Nora whispered, hardly believing what was happening. Slowly, deliberately this time, Marcus placed his palm against the back of her hand. Nora held her breath, waiting for her body to betray her as it always had. But the pain never came. For the first time in 18 years, another human being was touching her skin, and it felt completely normal. Tears streamed down Nora's face as the full weight of the moment hit her. I can't believe it, she whispered. I can't believe it. Doesn't hurt. Marcus kept his hand steady against hers, his own eyes bright with amazement. Neither can I. Your skin isn't showing any reaction at all. They sat like that for several minutes, both marveling at the impossible thing that was happening between them. Finally, Marcus gently pulled his hand away, and Nora immediately missed the contact. I don't understand it, she said, staring at her unmarked skin. Neither do I, Marcus admitted. But Nora, this could change everything for you. As she left the clinic that day, Machi's carrier in one hand and a follow-up appointment card in the other, Nora felt something she hadn't experienced in nearly 2 decades. Hope that she might finally find her way back to the world of human connection. Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Nora. 3 days had passed since their first session, and he'd found himself researching her condition obsessively, looking for any scientific explanation for what had happened between them. He'd called colleagues, scoured medical journals, even reached out to specialists in rare neurological disorders. No one had ever heard of a case where selective touch sensitivity occurred with such specificity. You seem distracted today, Mrs. Chun observed, as Marcus stared blankly at his appointment schedule for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Just thinking. Through a complex case, he replied, though that was an understatement. Nora had occupied his thoughts in ways that went far beyond professional curiosity. There was something about her courage in facing years of isolation, her quiet strength in the face of unimaginable loneliness, that drew him in completely. When Nora arrived for her second appointment, Marcus felt his pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with medical excitement. She looked different, less guarded, with a lightness in her step that hadn't been there before. Mach's carrier swung gently at her side, and she offered him a genuine smile as she entered his office. "How have you been feeling?" Marcus asked as they settled into their usual chairs. "Strange," Nora admitted, unconsciously touching the spot on her wrist where he'd first made contact. "I keep expecting it to have been a dream, or for the pain to suddenly appear delayed. But nothing happened, no reaction at all." "I've been thinking about that," Marcus said, leaning forward slightly. "I'd like to try some more extensive contact today, if you're comfortable with that. We need to understand the parameters of this phenomenon." Over the next hour, they conducted what felt like the most intimate experiment of both their lives. Marcus touched her hands, her arms, her shoulders, each contact deliberate and careful. Every time, Nora braced herself for pain that never came. Her skin remained perfectly normal, showing none of the angry welts that had defined her condition for 18 years. "This is impossible," Nora whispered as Marcus's palm rested against her forearm. "Why does it work with you?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted, but privately he was beginning to suspect the answer wasn't purely medical. There was something deeper happening between them, some connection that transcended the physical symptoms of her condition. As their sessions continued over the following weeks, the boundaries between patient and therapist began to blur. Marcus found himself sharing stories about his own past, his move from Denver, his struggles with confidence after losing a patient. Nora opened up about her childhood, her family's inability to understand her condition, her dreams of someday traveling the world instead of hiding in her apartment. "I used to want to be a journalist," she told him during their 5th session. Marcus's fingers intertwined with hers as they tested the limits of her tolerance. "I thought I'd go to foreign countries, write about different cultures. Then this happened, and I had to give up everything that involved being around people." "You could still do that," Marcus said softly, "if we can figure out how to expand this breakthrough beyond just my touch." But even as he said it, a selfish part of him hoped they wouldn't succeed too quickly. These sessions had become the highlight of his week, the one time when he felt truly useful again. More than that, he was falling in love with Nora's quick wit, her resilience, the way she lit up when she talked about her translation work or her plans for Machi. The realization hit him during their 7th session, when Nora was describing a particularly beautiful German poem she'd been translating. The afternoon sun streaming through his office window caught the gold highlights in her brown hair, and when she laughed at something he said, Marcus felt his heart clench with longing. He was in love with his patient, not just attracted to her, but deeply, completely in love, in a way that threatened every professional boundary he'd ever maintained. "Marcus?" Nora's voice brought him back to the present. "You seem far away." "Sorry, I was just thinking about your progress," he lied. But the way she looked at him suggested she sensed there was more to it than that. The session ended with what had become their ritual, a long embrace that proved again and again that her condition simply didn't exist when she was in his arms. But as Nora pulled away, her eyes searching his face, Marcus realized that his feelings were becoming impossible to hide. "I should go," Nora said quietly, but she made no move toward the door. "Nora, I need to tell you something," Marcus began, then stopped himself. He couldn't risk destroying the trust they'd built, couldn't jeopardize her progress by admitting his feelings. "What is it?" she asked, stepping closer. The space between them seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. Marcus could smell her perfume, could see the flecks of green in her brown eyes. It would be so easy to lean down and kiss her, to cross the line that had been haunting his dreams for weeks. Instead, he stepped back. "Just that I'm proud of how far you've come. You're incredibly brave, Nora." Something flickered across her face. Disappointment, perhaps, or recognition of what he'd almost said. She nodded and gathered Mach's carrier, but her movements seemed heavier than when she'd arrived. "I'll see you next week," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. After she left, Marcus sat alone in his office, staring at the chair where she'd been. He was playing with fire, and he knew it. But for the first time since Jennifer's case, he felt truly alive again. The question was whether he was strong enough to maintain his professional boundaries, or whether his feelings for Nora would ultimately destroy them both. Nora couldn't sleep. For 3 nights since her last session with Marcus, she'd lain awake replaying every moment, every almost spoken word, every lingering touch. Something had shifted between them, something that went far beyond the medical miracle of her healed condition. The way he looked at her, the careful distance he'd suddenly put between them. She recognized the signs because she felt the same overwhelming pull toward him. She was in love with her therapist. The man who had given her back her ability to experience human touch was also the man who made her heart race with a single smile. It should have been simple. He was helping her. She was grateful. Attraction was natural. But nothing about Nora's life had ever been simple. "What do you think, Machi?" she asked, absently stroking the cat's fur as she stared out her apartment window at the city lights. "Am I crazy to think he feels it too?" Machi purred and settled more firmly in her lap, offering the only comfort Nora had known for years. Until Marcus. The next morning brought an unexpected call from her sister Rebecca in Portland. "Nora, I know this is short notice, but I'm flying in this afternoon. There's something I need to tell you in person." Panic rose in Nora's throat. "Rebecca, you know I can't. If this is about trying to hug me again, it's not about that. Just trust me, okay? I'll keep my distance, but this can't wait for a video call." When Rebecca arrived at Nora's apartment that evening, she looked tired and worried. She settled into the chair across from Nora, respecting the invisible barrier that had defined their relationship for years. "I'm getting married," Rebecca said. Without preamble, Nora's face lit up. "Becca, that's wonderful. When? Where? Tell me everything about him." "Next month. Small ceremony in Portland. And Nora ... I want you to be my maid of honor." The words hung in the air between them. Nora felt the familiar weight of isolation pressing down on her chest. A wedding meant crowds, celebrations, physical contact she couldn't participate in. "I can't," Nora whispered. "You know I can't be around people like that. What if I told you there might be a way?" Rebecca leaned forward intently. "I've been doing research on your condition, and I found some interesting case studies. There are documented instances where patients have shown dramatic improvement through specific types of therapy." Nora's heart began to race. "What kind of therapy?" "Trust-based touch therapy with someone who has a deep emotional connection to the patient. The theory is that the condition might be partly psychological. Your nervous system has learned to associate human touch with pain, but under the right circumstances, with the right person, that association can be broken." Nora thought about Marcus, about the miraculous absence of pain when he touched her. Could Rebecca be right? Was there a psychological component to her healing that she'd been afraid to acknowledge? "There's something else," Rebecca continued gently. "I hired a private investigator to look into the start of your condition. Nora, what happened when you were 8 wasn't just the divorce. Do you remember Uncle Gary?" The name hit Nora like a physical blow. Uncle Gary, their father's brother, who had stayed with them for a few weeks during the divorce proceedings. Uncle Gary, who had offered to help comfort 8-year-old Nora during her parents' fights. Uncle Gary, whose touches had felt wrong and frightening, though she'd been too young to understand why. "The condition started right after he left," Rebecca said softly. "I think your body learned to protect you the only way it could, by making all human touch unbearable." Tears streamed down Nora's face as memories she'd buried for years began to surface. The uncomfortable hugs, the way Uncle Gary's hands lingered too long, the relief she'd felt when he finally left. Her condition hadn't been random at all. It had been her mind's desperate attempt to keep her safe. But if that's true, Nora whispered, then why can Marcus touch me? Rebecca smiled knowingly. Maybe because your heart trusts him. Maybe because for the first time since you were 8 years old, you've met someone whose touch feels safe instead of threatening. That night, Nora made 2 phone calls. The first was to Marcus, asking if she could see him outside of their regular appointment. The second was to Rebecca, telling her sister she would try to attend the wedding. When Nora arrived at the clinic the next evening, Marcus was waiting in his office with Chinese takeout and a worried expression. "You sounded upset on the phone," he said, gesturing to the food. "I thought you might be hungry." Nora settled into her usual chair, but for the first time, she found herself wishing she could sit closer to him. "I need to tell you something. About my condition. About why it started." As she shared Rebecca's research and her own recovered memories, Marcus listened with growing understanding. When she finished, they sat in silence for several minutes. "It makes sense," Marcus said finally. "Trauma-based conditions often have very specific triggers and exceptions. Your nervous system learned to associate human touch with danger, but somehow I don't trigger that response." "Why you?" Nora asked, looking directly into his eyes. "What makes you different?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with something. Finally, he spoke. "Maybe because I care about you, Nora. Maybe because my feelings for you go far beyond what's appropriate for a therapist." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. "I care about you too," Nora said quietly. "More than I should. More than I ever thought I could care about anyone." Marcus stood up slowly and moved to the chair next to hers. "If we do this, if we explore what's between us, everything changes. I can't be your therapist anymore. You'd need to see someone else for your continued treatment." Nora reached for his hand, marveling again at the complete absence of pain. "Maybe I don't need treatment anymore. Maybe I just need you." When Marcus leaned down to kiss her, Nora felt something she'd never experienced before. The pure joy of intimate human contact without fear, without pain, without barriers. Her condition hadn't been cured by medicine or therapy. It had been healed by trust, by love, by finding someone who made her feel safe enough to let down the walls her mind had built to protect her. 3 weeks later, Nora stood beside her sister. At Rebecca's wedding, wearing a beautiful bridesmaid dress and a radiant smile. She hugged Rebecca before the ceremony, the first time she'd embraced her sister in 18 years, and felt only love and joy. Marcus sat in the front row, watching the woman he loved celebrate her return to the world of human connection. Later, as they danced together at the reception, Nora marveled at how far she'd come from the isolated translator who had been afraid to leave her apartment. "No pain?" Marcus whispered as he spun her around the dance floor. "No pain," Nora confirmed, pulling him closer. "Just you." They had defied medical explanation, challenged professional boundaries, and risked everything for love. But sometimes, Nora thought as Marcus held her close, the heart knows how to heal what the mind cannot understand. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is exactly what you need to save yourself. In learning to trust Marcus's touch, she had learned to trust the world again. And in loving him, she had finally found her way home.